Good afternoon. Thank you so much for all those that worked on this conference and those that contributed, and of course the people who did all the work, and for the nice introduction. I would like to debate some of the things you said, but there's no time. I think the best thing is just wait for the book. Everybody's been very kind because I'm ambassador of Saudi Arabia. And I've been called all sorts of fantastic things. From 3-star, well, actually somebody gave me 5-star Michelin. I like to cook, and as you can see, I like to eat. And even Washington would not stop me from doing these things. And then all the things you said, anyway, it's not the time to dispute it, but you're very kind. In the rush to accommodate all the requests to attend and all the great things they've done, the organizers never told me what they wanted me to speak about. Now I go to you, Bill, what do you want to speak about? The history of balsamic vinegar, or the best rice for the Saudi dish, kabsa. I can speak about this for hours. As for Saudi-American relations, Arab-American relations, I mean, I'm only the ambassador. How can I talk about these things? And I'm still learning. It's been a very steep learning curve. My background was economic development, not even finance or investment. I was in the policy game, and I failed tremendously at Sagia to make a big impact on the Saudi public sector management. And now the 2030 vision is the one where I hope a lot of great achievements internally, economically, socially, and in the long run politically will ride on it. Many things were said that covered many aspects of issues that you would be, interested to hear about. The ambassador cannot have an opinion, so all the subjects were covered. And I heard Prince Turki didn't leave anything to be discussed. He explained so many aspects, historical. John, of course, with his professorial tendencies, is so great in explaining a lot of background. So there is really very little. What I will do is maybe tell you very quickly the story of, since I came here. I presented my credentials about, I think, 8 months ago, end of January. Before, I wasn't not really very close. Interacting with Saudi-American relations started with these people and others, the Arab-American organizations back in the 70s. Actually, the one that got me hooked on this for a little while, but I didn't have a problem going cold turkey, was the great Fred Dutton, who used to be general counsel to Aramco, SABEC, the embassy, and almost everybody. And he grabbed me once when I was visiting here in 1978 and said, "You must go with me to the Congress." I thought actually it was for a tour, So I went because he wanted to get any Saudi to go with him. And suddenly I found myself sitting. I thought it was like in Saudi Arabia. You turn up and you knock a door and you go in, and any official will sit and have coffee. And then I sat with a congressman. And Fred was trying to get Saudis to get used to the American political process. You go to the Congress. In those days, we wanted some weapons. Later on, 79, 80, 81. So I was fascinated. Then I came across, again, I was invited by almost mistake to some big convention with Arab organizations, and everybody looks at our titles and suddenly you push and you don't know, you become a keynote speaker and you get on the podium and start trying to come up with something, sensible without saying anything, because I didn't have, so I used to say all generalities. Then many of us, officials and others, and King Fahad, and felt that Arab American organizations should be supported here because of the issues. In those days, number one was, and still is really, although people don't look up so far, is really the Palestinian problem. And other things. Then by 82, more things, Lebanon, this and this and this, and you know the rest of the story. Mr. Khomeini turns up next door and decides, the best way to rule is to attack everybody else. In those days, I think we were a mini Satan, maybe medium to small Satan, and the United States was number one. Then the problems start, and sea threats, this, there, and this. But I basically was interested in these things for a while. Since I retired from public service, 12 years ago, I wasn't really in touch with things. And then suddenly, I saw big attacks in the media on Saudi Arabia, a little bit, maybe about a year ago. And then when my nomination happened, I decided to follow political things. So I watched the news more. I changed my TV. Before it was food stations, soccer, art, local news, and then at the end, news. And I was astonished. There were things from the sublime to the ridiculous. Now, the status of the fourth estate in the Western democracies, in our opinion, in the third world, when we used to worship these icons, was totally destroyed after the Iraq invasion. And the reaction to the media, we used to, because of our shortcomings in many third world countries, worship newspapers in the West, freedom of speech, freedom of this. And when we saw what they were saying after Iraq war, and continuously for months and then years, all your institutions were, I cannot do a hand sign, but to people, whatever the Italians would, because they were not at all sensible, honorable, honest, and all of the things. The poor third world that were always, because of what they thought were shortcomings in their own societies, looked at the great people who say, we are the best, we have this, and in fact we can go to your country and kill you for what we have. And then they don't apply it in their own. This sort of... and then I found big attack. And then I come here to Washington, and from day one I was dazed and confused. And this is a famous phrase that came from famous poets of the late 60s, a group of poets, late 60s and 70s, called Led Zeppelin. And you like Led Zeppelin? We should have had background music here. And then there was no Stairway to Heaven here. Anyway, and I'm astonished. And I look at things. Of course, what people don't realize until they work with things is actually Washington changed. The issues changed. The basics for Saudi foreign policy did not change. The Saudis has been more proactive because the issues, the market, the demand, the places have been a lot more vibrant and real-time, and lots of things were happening. people tend to like to compare administrations, personalities, and this is totally wrong. You compare what is there in the field. We look at what we have in the Middle East. What happened to the Middle East? If I try to speak about what's happening now, 20 years ago, people would said, there's no room for more diseases in the Middle East. There's no room for more space to stab, to do. There's no more room for this and this and that. And all this actually happened. And it is very sad. Now, there's a lot of rubbish on the internet. There has always been. Because people are far away and they have nothing to do, I think, all day. And or they are pushing things and they have their own programs. It's just the people who take them seriously. So when I wasn't at all tweeting the tweets or listening, or some people send me things. And it really looked very depressing. Final meeting with our head of state about my nomination, after they took the handcuffs off, was when he sat down with the princes and the ministers, and he said, Alhamdulillah, relations are good. Inshallah, it will get better. And I'm sure many of you know the meaning. Inshallah means God willing. And I remember an Englishman who dealt with Arab Gulf students a long time ago. When people communicated with him, said Inshallah, he said, okay, Inshallah yes or Inshallah no. Anyway, the king said relations are good. And then I had the fortune of actually coming with him before I was accepted by the United States as a member of the delegation. And then we worked within the foreign ministry and other departmental work here. And many people were exaggerating some issues, some problems. The style we have now in the upper government is for the reason of what is required, not because of, personality quirks or this person or that person. Of course, personal style matters. And don't tell me it doesn't happen in democracies. But it is what was needed. In the older days, it was big issues that move slowly. And then corresponding what's happening on Earth, a lot of issues were coming. And what is more so now is that a lot of things are happening around Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia is doing what I should say the market requires. Some Arabs or others might think that Saudi Arabia, just one day, the king at the time got upset with little Bashar al-Assad. Why did we get upset when he, of all people, had a very special position for Syria for a long time? It's because he killed al-Hariri, Rafiq al-Hariri, and was doing things in Lebanon. It wasn't because the Saudis woke up and said, today I must find an enemy to make me feel better in my own, or find an enemy like other neighbors did for my own rule. And then it developed from there. Why we are upset about the fact that he's continuing. It's very simple. He is bad because the Syrian people don't want him. At least 12 million who went out. And then it's difficult to make a deal while he's there. You go try to, historically, go back and see what some problems happened around the world where centers on the behavior or the action or the success of one person who did a lot of damage to humanity, killed a lot of people or started wars or whatever. You go and ask the victims and, why not think about the Syrians also? we have to think that all of these things are going to, the aftermath will remain with us. We're going to be there. We're not flying, doing bombing or long distance, whatever the toys are now, and then forget about it, or find somebody to clear up policing or cleaning up or whatever. We have to live with all of this. When one official asked me, why are you hitting infrastructure? I said, we're not hitting infrastructure. We're not like the Israelis. Israelis, Hezbollah lob a missile, then they go and hit a bridge or a power station. We don't want to do that, and we have been and will be forever with the Yemen people, having to deal with issues, having to deal with problems. The same everywhere. What are the basic parameters of Saudi foreign policy? Protection of human lives, the peace of mind of those lives, and the economic well-being. People have to eat. They have to plan. People need all issues to do with the dignity of daily living. You cannot do that with what's happening. You cannot solve problems by concocting convenient peace agreements on nice loans. You cannot go from one meeting to another just thinking about that moment and the photo op and what are you going to do with the press? Instead of saying what are you going to do with the deaths of people or the timing or what should we do, the main obsession is what to do with the press now. Do we do a press conference or a press briefing? Yalla, let's do photo op this, yes, ready, and then go to another meeting. We have to all work very hard. Saudi Arabia has been one of the most consistent third world countries, and certainly Arab countries, in its relations with the outside. I'll tell you facts, you go check them, and I'm not going to elaborate. We had our best relations with well-established, well-respected democracies. We had problems with failed states, failed leaders, who some of you used to call the progressive Arab regimes. Progressive because of the title of the name they picked. Khomeini, by the way, picked Islamic Republic. The Saudis said Arabian, because this is what related. You don't use religion as a label to go. Like all this Islamic banking or this or that, it's not Saudi Arabia Islamic because the people are Islamic, because it has the, and you don't need to go and stick it on labels. We never used it, we never had the intention. Now, with the United States, it started purely business, then people to people through the oil activities and engineering activities, and students and education. Only much later, and in response to something, the strategic convergence of views happened. Why? Because the Soviets were coming from under the table and over the table. And we sided with the West. And you know why? For internal reasons. The bulk of Saudi population now were in the middle, untouched by modernization, world activity for almost 1,000 years, because the Ottomans blocked. We had absolutely nothing, and it's so difficult to describe how it was, even in my generation's early days. And we were not worth colonizing. Even the Ottomans would not colonize us. And the only people we saw, the Turks coming, killing a few people, taking some shooting practice, and then the Sufis, who used to walk across to the pilgrimage. In fact, any foreigner up to 40s, we used to call Darawish. darwish, from the dervishes. After that, when we got to know other Arabs, mostly people from Syria who were called Sham, we started calling everybody with trousers Shami, Shwam. And then slowly we opened up and people kept coming. I heard a story recently that said that when the oil agreement with the Americans was being worked on, first question when they first came was King Abdulaziz said, do they believe in God? So they said yes. Then he asked his advisor or person who brought them, do they have any colonies? He said no. So he said, I will sign. The bit about believing in God is very important because the Saudis, just a little bit before that year, were actually, most of them were in revolt, edged on for political reasons, but using the religious backdrop, were basically protesting the openness to the world. One, it was very little opening. And this we've had up and down for years. Fast development in the 70s, a reaction from a lot of people, again, edged on by some religious thinking and some religious, you could say conservative, activist, extremist, take your own label. And then later on, lots of issues came up with the United States. What people are so shocked about, and particularly the Saudi tweeters, is that they've never seen a lot of these issues come up. Before, it didn't. They weren't the same situation. As for the relationship with America, of course, we have never before, and because of what is on the ground and what is needed for the public, we have never talked about it in public. Now we have two meetings, a meeting between an official, our officials, and they go out, each one saying something different about Syria. We say Bashar al-Assad must go, otherwise the public will not accept him, and the others go and say whatever they say. We disagree in public, agree in public, and the same in private. There's constant meetings. I think once we probably heard that our foreign minister was speaking to Mr. Kerry 17 times in 5 days. And it is because of the way people communicated and because of what's happening on the ground. If you want to do something positive, you have to be on top of things. People who want to damage, disrupt, sabotage, terrorize, whatever they do, they don't care. They go from one point to another without thinking about the impact. They just want to go for the kill. People who, and I hope we are having many who would be with us, who want to do good, they have to work very hard. The relations with the United States have been good, successful. We had major differences. I don't want to go through the milestones. Primarily, one is 1973. The other one was Camp David, summer of '79, where at the time the administration wanted a clear position. Our position was very clear, but it's not something that you can announce. Then we wanted to stay with the Arab fault because we did not trust Saddam Hussein walking away with them. And we also wanted to support any peace, but we were worried about the way it was done by Mr. Sadat and the lack of attention to the details, both on the Egyptian side and on the American side. In fact, I remember King Fahd tried and made a big study, and he sent it to Mr. Carter on what does self-rule mean or autonomy. It was so detailed, it's unbelievable. It talked about electricity metering, parking space, and all of this. Because if you are an occupier, you could really squeeze the public in ways that nobody would see. And who's going to do the details? Who's going to follow the details? and the Palestinians were not consulted. So how can you talk about self-rule and autonomy if you don't know the little details? So we were caught, and there was very bad tension, very bad stress in the relationship. But the relationship is so diversified, so deep, historically, almost 9 decades, and it has been good for the world. Saudi Arabia has had a very major positive involvement in world organizations, in a lot of processes that took place in a lot of things in the Middle East. And just look at the ones we were friendly with. And look at what had been achieved in the United States. Saudi Arabia was one of the few countries that were at the forefront of fighting the Soviet threat, the Soviet empire, and had been very supportive of the United States. There were a lot of things in the past. As of now, there's so many things. Commerce, political work on a daily basis, counterterrorism in a big way, people to people. We probably have the largest community of Saudis in social relations, marriage, intermarriage, more than maybe most of the Arab countries we border, except maybe for Egypt and Kuwait. One of the major things that we noticed with American corporations is that they move very fast in a country they know. And believe me, in Saudi Arabia, they knew Saudi Arabia very well. When in the 90s, there was some people in the administration who thought of this MENA straight line, Morocco to Jordan. The US government funded the administration of all these governments except 2, Algeria and Libya. They also had a good understanding with them. This is after 92. There were talks with the Palestinians, Madrid conference before, then the Oslo thing. A major article appeared at that time, leaking, and the leak came from 2 senior US government officials, leaked the Chapter 4 within the IMF report, which derided the Saudi economy, financial situation. The Saudi government lost during Iran-Iraq war, Iraq invasion and subsequent liberation, which was a brilliant cooperation between the 2 countries. Anything I really have heard from 190 billion to 230 billion. And it was very important, and the Saudis never thought about the cost because it would have been disastrous, because we thought Saddam Hussein was a political criminal who behaved in such a way that was totally unnecessary and who did not care. I mean, he could have drove down the highway from the Kuwait border to where I was working in Jubail. We could have bombed the hell out of his troops, and he doesn't care if he lost 100,000 or whatever. And he could have caused damage, to world economy, but lives mostly. And the way the Saudis responded to it, the way they prepared for it, the way they did it, was brilliant. Although there were even people here, and certainly in our part of the world, who were saying the Americans were going to occupy the Gulf. I don't know, any of you who remember those days, they said that the Americans were going to occupy the Gulf, fix oil prices at 22, $2 per barrel for production cost, and $10 per barrel for the troops, American troops, and $10 for the host country. This caused many people believed it. We had all sorts of people in our country and the Gulf set up and start positioning themselves. There was a man who was under corruption trial who suddenly decided to call his organization, I think, the Human Rights something, and he was under corruption charges, And then suddenly, he thought of himself as a great leader, and because everybody thought the Americans would take the Gulf, so everybody was polishing themselves or taking positions. There was a religious preacher somewhere who thought, people will not get arrested if the Americans are there. Everybody thought, Anyway, we had very clear agreement with the United States, a lot more detailed than people think. The Saudis insisted on the alcohol and drug laws to apply, and the officers were so upset. And then I remember one logistics general in charge of logistics who came to us to thank all those that supported the coalition troops. And he said to me, "Thank God you agreed, you insisted on this, on Saudi laws." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because we had much less loss, or many less losses than for the same size over a 3-week period than a NATO exercise in Germany. We had a great experience with the American military, and I'm so happy to see a few. I also saw 1 or 2 Saudis and others from West Point, and I think from the Navy, and also some female officers. I was hoping they'd be Saudi. The Ministry of Defense hires civilian, but not yet military women. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the field is different, the issues are different, the speed of dealing them, but it is the same. Working with the United States on a number of issues based on a lot of factors, but based on the fact that the United States says they will do good, and hopefully they will be able to do a lot of good. And it is just hard work. I mean, hard work will get you there. And there is tremendous trust in each other. Some people like to label things with certain administrations, certain lines. But sorry, I spoke a bit too much, and I was hoping to get some questions and answers, but I think there are people coming. Did you get any questions? Anything interesting?
Yes. You want to ask?
Where are they? Can I see?
Yes.
Do you think Saudi Arabia runs out of oil? What is your opinion about, I don't understand.
Vision 2030.
Is this oil? Yeah, it is.
2030 vision.
2030 vision. What's your opinion about the 2030 vision?
No, do you think Saudi Arabia will run out of oil? Run out or will run?
Run out.
No.
There's some more for you.
Missing with America and Saudi Arabia, Arab partners, understanding. I mean, of course, there's always misunderstanding. You meet somebody for sometimes who doesn't know the history or the background of, say, the Yemen issue. I met somebody, I should say somebody without she anymore, because I don't want to criticize. I sit with him to talk about things, and he said, "What about the madrasas?" What? And I was thinking, of course, in my mind, I went to a madras sauce, being, I like food, so I was thinking, I thought he was talking about cooking. And then he's talking about madrasas, Taliban, Afghanistan, Pakistan. We built schools, mosques, libraries for Muslim minorities everywhere, like anybody who wants to do, and they lack schools and things, and they think it's the same as madrasas. We have nutcases, extremists and others with us who terrorized it socio-religiously before, and we suffer from the same thing. And they think, just because you build a building, that you are Talibanish, or Pakistan intelligence who built the idea of a Taliban, the students going. So there is, yes, a lot of misunderstanding, but it needs servicing, a lot of hard work, media, public. Saudis and Arabs don't like to do this. I think it's, impolite. No. Why? I see Saudis and Arabs who are educated here. And I say, look, why don't you bring more journalists and more people to speak? No. So what? Let them say whatever. Unfortunately, we suffer in some markets, political markets. What more can U.S. and Saudi Arabia do to respond to the crisis? Just have a good understanding and know who is doing what, and just think of a timetable very quickly. I'm sure the ambassador of Yemen explained much better than me. One thing about us, I can only see, if anybody attacks human lives and disturbs the border and whatever, for whatever reason, we're going to continue hitting them no matter what it takes. No matter what it takes, because you cannot live with this. We've seen it in other Arab countries. We've seen huge numbers coming to the States and the West because they procrastinated on two things. We will continue. We have righteousness, legitimacy, a lot of support, and anybody who wants to solve the Yemen problem should understand who is making all the problems. We will not at all allow anything to develop in the future like this, no matter what it takes. What do you think about Jasta? What is Jasta? I'm only the ambassador.
That is the,
No, I understand.
you know what it is.
Yeah, it is an unfortunate American thing. It is really an American issue, and a lot of countries were very disturbed about it, and it's up to the Americans, really. How do you see the future relations between U.S.? Well, we'll continue working, and the basics are there. The ups and downs are short-term. I mean, you deal with them and handle them. We've been through thick and thin, and actually it's never been as much involved as before. Really, on Mabruk. We have a wedding ceremony today. Question to visit.
What do you tell the Saudi Arabian people, and how do you tell them about the anti-Muslim hate speech by Donald Trump and others in the last year and a half?
What can I tell them? I mean, they know about such situation. They follow things. In fact, some of them are better informed than I. You should see when I go home, people corner me, even our youngsters in our family and others, asking difficult questions where I don't even know the background to it. It is, I don't know, Americana. A feature of political life. We've seen this before, actually. I mean, I remember being asked and sent, actually, to people who were close to Reagan, President Reagan, who was in the elections in 1980, everybody used Saudi Arabia. You see, during this season, another thing, I imagined, why did somebody who, in fact, I've been trying to ask who, and who has been behind all these things, shukran. I imagine Saudi Arabia being taken, the name, you get a balloon, you put our name on it, and then I imagined all these machines under making hot air. Excuse the pun. No, it's not a pun. You know what I mean? A lot, and everybody's shooting at us. I think maybe here is a feature of politics on TV, where if something becomes famous, everybody would want to use it. What is missing in America? Yeah, we talked about that. Anyway, I should really stop. I'm taking your time. I'm sorry.
Mr. Ambassador, we can conclude on this. We've appreciated
You
your
have one
humor
question?
and your insight. You have one last one that you want to answer?
I just want to say, Saudi Arabia has been a target for good and bad. Generally, the United States is fully understanding the importance of the relationship and the diversification, the subjects. I tell you, I can't have time to do anything here. So many things going on, and that is with me not covering a lot of the important things that I should be covering. I haven't done a lot of media. I haven't done a lot of things. This is, I think, one of the first major gatherings that I spoke. I spoke in one or two places. We can't keep up with the issues. I mean, when I see people, I cannot speak in general like this because it's a general audience. Because yesterday they had a meeting. This morning they had the phone. But one thing for sure, we in Saudi Arabia have the important location. We border 10 Arab countries, facing East Asia all the way to South Africa, facing Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and India. We have the oil, holy places. We will always be a target. Anybody would want to start with Saudi Arabia, good or bad. You want to bring something, you go to talk to Saudis, because the other important thing is the relationship with many of the nations in the Middle East. The important ones, the sensible ones. But we will always be a target for every Tom, Dick, and excuse the pun this time, Zawahiri. Thank you.